Hello, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to make a video about the history of Argentina. Let's get started. Before the arrival of the conquistadors from Spain in the early 16th century, Argentina was inhabited by several local tribes. The most prominent among them were the Inca, and the Mapuche people. However, none of these indigenous groups would play a significant role in the country's history after the Spanish conquest. He founded the city of Buenos Aires in February of 1536, but it was attacked by indigenous groups and the Spaniards were forced to flee. Only 23 survived and they abandoned the city in June of the same year. In 1516, the first European to set foot in what is today Argentina was an explorer named Juan Díaz de Solís, who landed at the estuary of the Rio de la Plata. During this time, Buenos Aires became a major port city and a center of trade and commerce. However, the Spanish colonial government was based in Lima, Peru, and Buenos Aires was relatively isolated from the rest of the empire. This led to a sense of regional identity and autonomy among the inhabitants of Argentina. He had originally intended to explore the area for gold and other riches, but he soon realized that the territory was largely barren, and that there was little to be found here. The first government of this period, the so-called ragamuffin government, was followed by the national government of Juan Manuel de Rosas, a dictator who ruled from 1829 to 1852. Under his leadership, a new constitution was drafted in 1853, and the country was officially renamed the Argentine Confederation. His regime was marked by political instability and violence between Federalist and Unitarian factions. By 1866, this had grown to 3.4 million, and by 1895 to 7.4 million. The influx of European immigrants led to the emergence of a new Argentine identity that blended European and indigenous influences. This was reflected in the country's art, literature, and music, which often celebrated Argentine culture and identity. Between 1853 and 1890, gross domestic product grew from 340 million to 1.7 billion pesos. However, the fragile democracy was soon replaced by a military dictatorship led by Despite the political turmoil, Argentina continued to grow economically, and by the 1930s had become one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America once again. However, the benefits of this economic growth were not evenly distributed, and the gap between the wealthy elite and the rural poor continued to widen. His regime was marked by a growing tension between labor and management, as well as between the government and the country's traditional elites. The economy contracted sharply and unemployment rose to nearly 20%. This event, known as the Revolution Libertadora, marked the end of the Second Republican period and the beginning of a new era in Argentine history. However, the reforms were unpopular, and in 1958, a group of army officers led by Major General Juan Carlos overthrew the government and established a new military dictatorship. In 1943, a group of army officers led a coup and overthrew the government of Justo. This regime was marked by a brutal crackdown on political dissidents and the use of torture and disappearances to suppress opposition. This period of democratic rule has continued to the present day, although it has been marked by periods of economic instability and political corruption. The new regime, known as the Third Republican period, was dominated by a small group of military leaders and Perón, who was the Secretary of Labor under the previous government. In response to the crisis, the government of Agustín Justo implemented a series of protectionist economic policies that included import substitution, industrialization, and state intervention in the economy. The first step towards independence began when a group of Creoles or people of European descent who were born in Argentina led a revolution against the Spanish colonial government. This was a series of protests and rebellions against the government of Victorino de San Martin, who was accused of corruption and mismanaging the economy. This was followed by the Declaration of Independence in 1816 and the establishment of the United Provinces of the Rio de la Plata. This led to the growth of labor unions and socialist political parties in Argentina. As a result, he left and was never seen again. The government of Julio Argentino Roca implemented policies to promote economic growth, such as the introduction of a new currency and the construction of railroads. However, these policies had mixed results and the country's economic problems persisted. However, by mid-century, Argentina had emerged as a sovereign nation and began to pursue a policy of isolationism in order to protect its newly won independence. In 1827, it expanded its territory to include the region of Patagonia, and in 1829, it defeated Brazil in a war over the disputed region of the Rio de la Plata Basin. This victory secured Argentina's access to the Atlantic Ocean and established its borders with Brazil. However, another Spaniard, Pedro de Mendoza, arrived in 1535 with plans to establish a settlement. A second attempt at colonization was made in 1560 when a new settlement was built, this time under the direction of Domingo Martínez de Urala, who was appointed governor of the region. This settlement became known as the City of the Most Holy Trinity and Good Air, or simply, Buenos Aires. In 1580, it was officially established as the capital of the newly created Viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata, which included present-day Argentina, Uruguay, Bolivia, and Paraguay. During this time, the Spanish colonial administration in Argentina focused primarily on the production of agricultural products such as wheat, tobacco, and sugarcane, as well as livestock such as cattle and horses. These products were exported to other parts of South America, Europe, and Africa. In addition, the Spanish crown granted large tracts of land to a small number of Spaniards, creating a system of haciendas or estates where indigenous labor was used to produce agricultural products and raise livestock. By the end of the 18th century, the population of Argentina had grown to around 1 million people, of whom about 2/3 were of European descent, 1/3 were of mixed race, and 10% were indigenous. During the 19th century, Argentina went through a process of independence and nation-building that was largely influenced by Enlightenment ideas. The following decades were marked by conflict between the new Republic and Spain, as well as internal struggles for power among the various factions within Argentina. During this time, Argentina experienced significant economic and territorial growth. By the end of the 19th century, Argentina had become one of the most prosperous countries in Latin America due to its vast wealth of natural resources and a favorable British loan. In 1852, a coalition of provincial governors deposed Rosas and replaced him with a more moderate leader, Justo José Girão. In 1862, the first census was conducted, recording a population of 2.4 million people. In addition to the economic and territorial expansion during this period, Argentina also experienced significant social and cultural changes. Furthermore, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Argentina became a destination for anarchists and socialists fleeing persecution in Europe. However, by the end of the 19th century, Argentina's prosperity began to decline due to a number of factors, including overpopulation, environmental degradation, and economic crises. In the early 20th century, Argentina experienced a period of political instability and violence known as the Revolution Laboral. In 1916, a new constitution was drafted and Argentina was officially proclaimed a democratic republic. This prosperity, however, did not last long, and the Great Depression of the 1930s hit Argentina hard. These policies were initially successful in protecting Argentine industries from foreign competition, but they also led to a sharp increase in government spending and a growing budget deficit. Perón quickly rose to prominence, and in 1946, he was elected president of Argentina in a landslide victory. In 1955, a group of army officers led by General Pedro E. Aramburu overthrew Perón and exiled him to Spain. Under the new regime, a series of political and economic reforms were implemented, including the nationalization of some industries and the introduction of a new constitution. This regime was marked by a crackdown on political dissidents and the suppression of labor unions. In the 1960s and 1970s, Argentina experienced a period of economic growth and industrialization under the leadership of the military regime. However, this growth was accompanied by growing inequality and social unrest. In 1973, Perón returned to Argentina from exile and was elected president for a second time. His third term in office was marked by a return to populist policies and a growing rift between the government and the country's elites. In 1976, a group of army officers led by General Jorge Rafael Videla overthrew the government and established a new military dictatorship known as the Last Dictatorship. In 1983, after 7 years in power, the military regime was overthrown and a new democratic government was elected. Today, Argentina is a major player on the international stage and a member of the G20. Its economy is the third largest in Latin America, and it is home to some of the world's leading universities and cultural institutions. Despite its many challenges, Argentina remains a vibrant democracy and a beacon of hope for people around the world who are fighting for freedom and democracy. Thank you for watching this video about the history of Argentina. If you enjoyed the video, Please leave a like and subscribe for more historical tales from around the globe. Until next time.